at CloudBees. He's a well-respected developer and popular speaker at industry and Jenkins community events, and he's often asked to speak about his experience and approach in creating Jenkins, the Jenkins project, which is a CI platform that's been widely accepted and adopted and a community-driven open source project. The principles behind the Jenkins community, extensibility, inclusiveness, low barriers to participation have been the keys to its success. KK's sensibilities in creating Jenkins and his deep understanding of how to translate its capabilities into usable software have also had a major impact on CloudBees' strategy as a company. Before joining CloudBees, Kohsuke, or KK as we affectionately call him, was Sun Microsystems with Sun Microsystems and Oracle, where he worked on a variety of projects and initiated the open source work then known as Hudson that led to Jenkins. So without further ado, Kohsuke Kawaguchi.
Thank you. All right, let's see if I could use this. Oh, good. Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry, that's it for my slide.
Minor detail. And the clicker support.
Yes. So today, I think we're here to talk about all about continuous delivery. And for a techie like me, the reason I get excited about continuous delivery is specifically because for us it's about automation. When I see the continuous delivery, automation is sort of like a very essential part of it. And then so there's a number of technologies in this space that involves automations, which I think is part of the reason this is a real effort as opposed to just another buzzword in the industry. And then, of course, my particular vehicle to sort of drive this automation space is Jenkins. So I've been working on this software for more or less like 10 years or so now. So for those of you who don't know Jenkins, just very briefly, Jenkins is an open source CI server, and it's primarily implemented in Java. But nowadays, it's used by all sorts of people for all sorts of environments and languages. One of the key reasons I think the Jenkins has been successful is because it's been extensible through right now more than 950 plugins. And then it's partly because what we do has incredible diversity. Everyone is using different set of tools and developing software for different domains. So we need a way to, like, single software needs to be able to kind of grow to adapt those. And then so the way we do it is by plugins. So on average, we see a brand new plugin released like about every other day. So in this week, we see probably, statistically speaking, we should see about 3.5 new plugins released. So that's how quickly this community is growing. I think another reason the Jenkins has been popular is it's sort of like from the very early days, it's capable of driving lots of computers. And as we all know, this is sort of like an emerging challenge for us, right? It used to be that we get one giant box that runs very fast, but that's no longer the case. We have to deal with lots of not so powerful machines. And then so, that's increasing the role of the servers like Jenkins who could drive lots of computers toward the useful purposes. And then I think another part of the Jenkins success, I think, is due to the ease of getting started. Tools like this is about productivity, so it needs to be easy enough to use. And then Jenkins is something you can spend like maybe 30 minutes to get up and running to do something useful, maybe just a little bit. And next week you'd come back and then just spend another 30 minutes to make it do a little bit more useful things and so on, and then so compounds. So these are the kind of things that the Jenkins has got going. And then, so as I mentioned, it's kind of getting really popular lately. Around 2008, we started adding this functionality into Jenkins where people could submit their anonymous usage information back to us so that we could see how people are using it and then use that to improve it. So for a while, we've been growing nicely. And then somehow, I think at some point, the major mainstream companies that started adopting Jenkins is probably what's going on. And then suddenly we are seeing a lot of growth. And then right now, counting more than close to 4 million jobs are running on these slave computers. I think it's like 19,000 or so. So that's enough to fuel a few data centers. So amazing number of the workload is being handled by Jenkins. And then perhaps as a reflection of this popularity, it's kind of difficult nowadays to go to any talks without hearing the name Jenkins dropped a few times. So if you've been to Amazon's big conference in Las Vegas, you'd have heard about Jenkins from the guy that works for Amazon. If you watch the Google platform event, this is a live cast event that the Google did, you would have seen the Jenkins live showing up in their demo, which is kind of unusual for Google to do. They tend to hide everything that they do. And they even made an appearance into their slides right there. So that's sort of how serious they see Jenkins in their tool chain. And if you've been to DockerCon, so Docker is all the rage, I guess, in this year. So you have seen also Jenkins made an appearance in their keynote slide, along with the GitHub and Amazon and so on. So that's an amazing the product placement. And there's another the survey that's been done by a company in East Europe. The Rebel Labs, Rebel Labs, I think is the name of the company. And they found that of the people doing continuous integration, 70% of the people use Jenkins. And the second runner-up is the Hudson for 8%. So those are basically people who have forgotten to upgrade, right? So that's, I mentally count that into the Jenkins family of the things. So it's really by far the most popular CI server. And speaking of the product placement, I don't know, is HBO a thing in the UK? Maybe not. All right. So in the US, there's a TV program, the TV channel that is called HBO, and they did a series called The Silicon Valley, which is a drama about the Silicon Valley startup. And in one night, this is like a startup company, so you have like a 5 dude working in a little house trying to develop this new compression algorithm of all the things. And so this is like 3 a.m. in the night. But this feature has to go into this tomorrow's demo, so everyone is frantically typing in the code, and then toward the end, they show the Jenkins user interface to show up, and then so they are all intensely watching for this the test to pass, and then in the end it all successfully passed, as you can see in the screenshot. It's all green, and they all high five and head for today. So that is this showed up in the TV, and more than 1 million people watched that. That's insane. And I didn't pay a penny for that, so I'm hoping to find somebody who managed to make this happen. So I think especially in the DevOps context, I think the part of the Jenkins, the reason Jenkins seems to be so picked up in various places is because we have all these integration into various tools. It's so that the tools that are giving are getting more popular. So I wanted to talk about some of those that we are working on. So one of the integrations that we've been spending some effort on is the integration with Puppet and Chef, these configuration management tools. So we see I think the operations field is sort of going through a renaissance. It's operation team used to be that they don't use the version control system. They don't have any build process. They don't have any tests. But nowadays, the operations guys are almost like programmers. They write code just in a different language called Chef or Puppet. That goes to the version control system. They get built or tested, and then they get used, right? So, it's only natural that the people in the operation field eventually find tools like Jenkins useful, just like programmers find them useful maybe 10 years back. So we are seeing a lot of traction in that space. And so those two, as those two worlds both adopt a similar sort of philosophy and similar set of tools, they start to interact more often. So we are trying to make sure that we could leverage that very well. So what we do is, if I know how to operate the pointer, maybe not. At the top. No, I don't think so. All right. Well, okay. Clearly, I'm not capable enough. Oh, here it is. Maybe I managed. So in the environment, the developers, they compile the code in Jenkins, and they turn that into some kind of like a binary, right? That is a result of the build. So that could be WAR file, that might be a MSI package, it could be RPM, there could be any number of things. And then often they leave Jenkins into some kind of artifact store. Maybe it's the Artifactory Nexus, so it could be just S3 like we do. And then this is usually the handoff point into the operations team, right? So you have the operation guys that have their separate set of programs that basically pull down files from these artifact store into the target server. So we've been improving the system so that the information could be sent back from these app server into Jenkins, so that the Jenkins should be able to know when the Puppet and Chef has run. So that's one of the traceability improvements we call. And that sort of allows us to sort of expand the domain of automation a little bit further. In terms of the Docker, we've been adding this Docker as an elastic build slave. So, we would start the we would start the slave process inside the Docker container, so you have a clean, isolated environment, and at the end you could throw that away. Jenkins would throw away that container, and then thereby bringing it back to the non-clean state. So you don't have to spend any cycle keeping the machine in a pristine state. It automatically happens every time you start a new build. Another thing that we are doing in distributed space is called Jenkins, the Git validated mode. So this is one of the enterprise features we have in JE. So the idea is, traditionally speaking, the way we develop is, okay, so the developer is hacking the source code, and then when the change is made, it actually goes back to the sort of team repository. And then the Jenkins will check out that code from there and then do the build and run the test. So by the time Jenkins discovers that there was a problem, the problem has already hit your server. So people tend to be a bit more cautious about pushing back commits into the repository. They tend to spend some time running tests and so on to make sure that it's not dead on arrival. But with the distributed version control system, it doesn't have to work that way. Instead of pushing changes up to the team repo, you could just push the changes into Jenkins repository and then have Jenkins test that. And then if that's okay, Jenkins could turn around and then push the result into the upstream. So that is what we did for Git. So as a developer in this new workflow, I could just send my changes into Jenkins and basically use him as my personal tester. Right? So nowadays, I use this all the time when I hack code, but I never have to now run the test on my laptop ever. I just, as soon as the code looks good enough to me, I just send it back to Jenkins. And if it's working, then the Jenkins will do its own thing, and eventually the change will hit the team repo. If it doesn't, it sends me email saying something has broken, so I go back to look into it. But it makes it a lot more efficient. And especially if you think about the fact that the test would be a whole lot easier to run on the server. Okay, I could run them in a massive parallel concurrent scale, and then I can get the result a lot more quickly. Things like that is difficult to do on your laptop. So that's now, let's see. So what I wanted to talk about is, that's some of the integrations, just a few of the integration in this, what I consider the modern tools in this space. But so one of the great thing about the Jenkins is that if you have ideas about how, if you have specific ideas about how you want things to be done, I think it's really great that the Jenkins is not prescriptive about what it does. It provides all the necessary building blocks, and you have freedom to assemble it in any way you see it. And that's often convenient because in most of the places that you guys work for, there are existing processes and existing ways people have worked. So try not to rock too many boats at the same time. Kind of tends to win you more friends. But at the same time, some people are doing more like a blue ocean thing. So they are actually looking for a bit more comprehensive story to sort of cover the whole thing. They are not interested in putting together things on their own. So Jenkins could also help you do that. So I wanted to sort of describe this, one of the setups that we've done in the Jenkins project to manage our own infrastructure by using Puppet and doing Docker and doing the continuous delivery. So if you think about the operations people inside Jenkins project, which is responsible for running our DNS servers, the web servers and the meter controlling software, account application, there's a number of small applications, right, which is probably often true with any internal IT ops in any companies. So what we did is we are trying to package these individual apps into a Docker container. So that allows us to sort of isolate the individual app pretty well, and then makes it easier to hack on one app at a time. And also the, well, in case of Jenkins, the fact that we have all the contributors around the world, they don't have access to the same network. So the fact that these apps are now portable makes it really easy for people to hack on them. So there's a number of repositories that each host the single applications in the GitHub. And then this is hooked under Jenkins. So every time the change is made into Jenkins, change is made into GitHub, Jenkins will build that, and then build the container, and then this container gets automatically uploaded into the Docker image repository tagged by the build number. And then there's another repository, I think we call the control repo. So this hosts all the Puppet manifest files. And then they refer to all the specific image of the application that we built. So this might say, okay, we're going to deploy the DNS build 5, IRC bot number 8, and then the robo butler number 11, the build 11, and so on. And then the way we make, so this is kind of like the master recipe for generating the Jenkins infra. So it's kind of the important repository. And then so when we make changes to it, we do so by creating a new pull request. So that obviously goes to the GitHub. And then here we use another feature in Jenkins to automatically build inbound pull requests automatically. So every time someone proposes a new change by creating a pull request, Jenkins should run the unit test on these Puppet manifests by using the framework known as RSpec Puppet. So it does some. And I guess the programming version of it would be the compiler. I think of it as an equivalent of compiler or the linker. So it generates enough, it does enough execution to the point that I could catch some errors, but it doesn't actually run anything. It doesn't deploy anything. And then, but obviously only certain kind of errors can be caught without deploying. So the second stage of the testing, so the next step in the pipeline would be to use the Vagrant to actually start a temporary servers on EC2, and then use those to actually run the whole deployment, and then verify that the things are running as expected by using another test library called the server-spec. So these 2 layers of this, the second level of testing takes a lot longer because obviously it's going through the actual testing. So you do have to download all the, install new version of the JDKs, copy all the relevant files, and then start the services and stuff like that. So it's a lot more costly exercise, but it does catch more errors. So that's the second part. And then the third part is we have our servers are hooked under the Puppet master. In your case, we use the Puppet Enterprise. And then so every time the change is made to this control repository on GitHub, we use the tool R10K, and then so the GitHub would pickle this R10K running on Puppet master, and they do the dependency management for one. So it's kind of interesting that this operation world seems to be basically, the evolution in the operations land is like very similar to the evolution on the programming side. We used to have just a compiler, and then we invented the dependency management tools, and then we wrote static code analyzer, and then the code coverage tools and stuff like that. And you can see the exact parallel that's happening in the operation side. The Puppet or the configuration management tool itself is a pretty big invention, but now the additional tools in the ecosystem, like dependency managers and then all this code, the static code analysis tool equivalent. But anyway, so we assemble the dependency properly in that phase, and also this will turn every branch into its own environment. So I can have a number of servers hooked under different environments. Let's say we use 2 mainly, the production and staging. So so in this way, every time the new change gets made and change gets pushed to Git, it automatically made available into the Puppet master, and then Puppet agent to pick them up automatically. So for us, with this kind of change, the deployment basically become a Git merge. So when we deploy, we just do the Git merge into staging, and that becomes this content of the staging server. And then if you're happy with what we are seeing in the staging, like I said, the testing, automated testing is not enough. So at the end of the day, the human would go in and casually make sure that the things are running as expected, and then we would push that into the production, right? So that's what we do. So partly through this exercise and also by talking to lots of Jenkins users, we discovered that when you're using Jenkins, there's this little bit of feeling of assembly required. That is, you have all these plugins. It's like an individual piece of jigsaw puzzle that can be combined into a sort of basically anything you want. But at the same time, the fact that you have to assemble is a bit of pain. So instead, what we thought is, what we started feeling is that we need a different kind of flexibility. It's something like the Play-Doh, like a single substance that you can kind of bend and shape into any shape you want. That kind of sort of provides a different degree of flexibility that would be necessary. So we started working on that, and then that is called the workflow plugin. I think in some of the earlier talks, this was mentioned a few times. So the key idea of the workflow plugin is instead of asking you to sort of create a lot of job and compose them, it's workflow is you can define it as a code. So the way I don't want you to read too much into it, but the way this is run is it's a program that runs from the top to the bottom. So here you say, okay, now I'm going to need a new slave, and here I'm giving you some temporary workspace in that slave, and then I'm going to run the checkout, and for 10 times I do Maven test. And so that's how you write this workflow. And then so part of the reason we opted for this workflow as a code approach is that Jenkins community seems to really like this kind of a DSL approach. But in this way, you have a lot of a rich control flow. So part of the reason people are doing this is for orchestrating a pipeline and so on. So you need lots of interesting control flows in it. And here, you don't have to learn a new way of creating that. You know how to program those. And then that's a lot well documented. And then it's also text-based, which means you could control, you can put this into version control system, look at diffs in meaningful way, manage changes. So those are all tangible benefits. And so we had another plugin called Build Flow plugin that's done by the community. That's actually done by one of the CloudBees employee. And then so this had a great success. And then one of the shortcomings, I think, that we are trying, in that plugin that we are trying to overcome here is the fact that now instead of, you can truly define everything inside a single workflow. So as you saw, you can tell Jenkins to check out the source code or execute the process. So you don't have to split them out into multiple places. So that is one of the key ideas in your workflow. And so as you could imagine, this is a very sizable change to the Jenkins. So it's a very significant plugin. So we are taking this opportunity to fix a lot of different things. And one of those is to be able to recover from the loss of Jenkins master or the slaves. So imagine you're running a workflow. So these things would take a lot of time. So let's say it's let's say 3 hours process from building and testing to validating, right? So in the course of that 3 hours, if you lost that slave in question, or if you are trying to take down the Jenkins and install the new plugins and bring it back up, today's Jenkins would mark the build as failure because it couldn't remember what it was doing before it shut down. So now in workflow, this is no longer the case. You could actually, you can take down the Jenkins instance while the workflow is running, and when it comes back up, it still remembers what it was doing before. And then, the another important thing about the workflow is that in these processes, you still want to have some key human checks and inputs at certain points. One of the users had told us that they do continuous deployment so long as there's no database schema change. But when there is a database schema change, they are not going to automatically deploy that. The DBA would have to manually make sure that that's not going to cause a critical data loss. So things like that you could sort of incorporate into otherwise automated chain. And then, so that I think is awfully useful feature. Another important feature I think that we are adding is called checkpointing. So imagine kind of like the build pipeline, the continuous delivery pipeline process, and then say, each box is taking maybe like an hour to run. So you'll be going through this deployment in one step at a time, and then when this process gets complex enough, at some point it's become inevitable, but there will be some failures, often silly reasons, like maybe the network was temporarily fragile, or maybe the disk space went out of the space in one of the phases. And when stuff like that happens, what you don't want to do is to go all the way back to the beginning and lose everything that you've done. So instead, in workflow plugging, what we let you do is we let you define what we call a checkpoint, sort of like a place of execution that's known to be worthy of keeping. And instead of going all the way back up, you can go back to the known checkpoints. And then just restart execution from there. And then, obviously after fixing the problem that caused the original failure, and then now you can bring it all the way to the completion. So that's, I think, a lot easier way to create a long-running workflow without spending a lot of time trying to figure out all the necessary intervention or recovering operations like that. So that's most of the work of the workflow plugin is going into the open source, but there are some efforts that we are also doing inside Jenkins Enterprise, and I think that's the kind of thing we do in general. Is that the open source Jenkins has quite a lot to offer, but as the usage grows, especially in the enterprise context, people could use the additional plugin that we provide, or the security features, or the support that we provide to help people solve the problems. So that's the kind of things we do in the Jenkins Enterprise. So I guess the wrap up my part, and I think I'm almost time here, is that so there's we have a lot of interesting integration to the tools that sort of people are interested in today, and more are coming. So there are a lot of improvements are made daily in this space. And I think for the larger enterprise, the fact that it doesn't come with this preconceived notion about how you should do this, the fact that it's not prescriptive is a big win. You can pick the fight that way, and then you can slowly convert people over time. And then there's also, but if you want to actually look at how people are putting things together, there are things that you can look at. The one that I just showed you about is how the Jenkins project manages its own infra. It's all out in the open source. So we discovered that putting things together like this between Puppet and Docker and Jenkins and so on is non-trivial. And then now you can go use what we've done and then start from there as opposed to start from scratch. And then finally, I think the workflow plugin is probably the most important plugin that we are working on this year. And then we really have a high hope for it. We think it will be a game-changing plugin that allows people to easily author a complex choreography that ties the individual point integration that Jenkins already offers. Okay, so with that, I think I'm done with my talk. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those. I think I have two or something. So.
Creating the product, I thought it will be a big hit or a popular product. Creating the core as a Jenkins product, I thought it will be used widely on.
Oh, I see. So I think your question is, when I originally started Jenkins, did I expect this to become popular? Yeah. No. I have lots of hobby projects, like hundreds of those. And there are a number of other projects that I thought would be a great idea that seems to be not really widely getting any traction. But on the other hand, this has a fairly sizable system, so I knew that it would become it will grow over time. But it's, yeah, I don't know. Yes, but I certainly didn't expect it to become like this. Yeah. So I was lucky.
What is the workflow stuff coming out?
Oh, when is the workflow stuff coming out? Yes, how come I failed to mention that? So there's a version already released right now, and then on the second or third iteration of it. We even have a Docker image that you can play with it. So if you search for the Jenkins workflow plugin, you will find their GitHub repo, and that contains the instruction of how you run it. It does require a fairly cutting-edge Jenkins release because it does require a lot of core changes. But you can also use it. If you have a serious production instance, I don't recommend you deploy it just there yet. But at least the syntax is very stable now, and then so you can start thinking about how this would apply to your designing the build process. And then we'd certainly love to hear from you. Now we could still change we could still make very major changes today. So we'd really love to hear from you about what you want to do. And we are aiming for release within this year, like a production quality release this year. So that's the current target. Yeah. All right. So if not, then
When you say cutting edge version, will it work on Cloud Bees at the moment?
So the question is, okay, does it run on? Does the workflow plugin run on the current version deployed on like cloudbees.com, the hosted Jenkins, DevCloud? No, it doesn't. So on DevCloud, we use LTS release. We need a lot more cutting edge. So I think the time, we are hoping that all necessary, so LTS will be able to start running workflow, I think, in a month or two. That's the current plan. Yeah, so you have to wait at least until then. Yeah. All right?
Thanks,
so
KK.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Gareth Lynn. Gareth manages the